I will be looking at neocolonialism as a way that the West, not just the West, but in general, a country that is more powerful than a lower country tries to control it. But I want to deviate and look at it from a different aspect generally. The reason why neocolonialism is a word that is constantly being pushed is because people look at Africa and say Africa as underdeveloped or undeveloped, and we look at it and say that, okay, maybe the result of that is because of neocolonialism. I would be an hypocrite to say that neocolonialism is not an issue in Africa, in modern day Africa, but I would not say that the reason why Africa is underdeveloped or the reason why West Africa is struggling is because of neocolonialism. We have a lot of issues affecting us. We have poor leadership, we have lack of foresight, lack of proper planning affecting us seriously in West Africa and in Africa generally. But we tend to focus on and say that, oh, the main flaw or the main issue of Africa is because of neocolonialism. And I know that as we further discuss, we will talk more on how things are and why I'm looking at things from that perspective.
Yeah, very important. I don't think most of these issues happen in isolation.
Yes, I don't think that they happen in isolation, and I don't want Africans, particularly, especially Africans that are just coming up, to look at Africa as a whole and say that, oh, our problems are solely based because we are being controlled by another element of other countries. And I'll give an example now. Cuba. Cuba is a country that is currently going through a lot of economic hardship. Just recently, they had been out of light for a very long time, and a lot of them still believe that the flaw that is happening in the economy and in the country as a whole has a lot to do with America. But Cuba itself don't have good leaders. And as time goes by, we'll talk more about all of these issues.
All right, yeah. So I think Cuba today kind of carry out some form of like socialism, basically.
Yes, similar to China and North Korea.
Yeah. So we may not really say that it's just the neocolonialism basically that's affecting it. And also, I also want us to like break down this mental barrier that neocolonialism just deals with African countries. I don't think it's just for African countries.
Oh yes, there is a lot, especially in South America.
Yeah.
You look at what the CIA and the US as a whole like did in terms of sponsoring coup, making sure that they had these banana republics, because there were some countries in South America that were huge producers of banana, for example. And the US sponsored coups in those countries to make sure that their companies were the forerunners of those products, to ensure that they were the ones harvesting the products, bringing it to America to sell. So basically creating a scenario where whatever products were produced, whether it was sugar, whether it was banana, whatever plant it was, they were going to be the ones at the forefront. So they did that a lot in the 1970s and the 1980s, making sure that whichever government was in place supported America. So if you were against them, they'll find a way to knock you out. You mentioned Cuba. Fidel Castro was the leader in Cuba. And we saw how the US tried multiple times before Cuba aligned itself with Russia. And we had that whole missile crisis of, oh, we're going to launch nuclear missiles and we are going to launch that USSR and America. We saw how that played out at the end of the day. So I think Seton is right that sometimes when we think about neocolonialism, we always think of Africa. We always think of like the black nation. And there's one country that comes to mind when I think about neocolonialism is in Djibouti. I was speaking to Abiodun about it before we started that 5 countries have military bases in Djibouti. The first one, we all know who is the first, the US.
Oh, that's standard.
Standard. So they established a military base in Djibouti in 2002 as a direct response to, September 11, the attack at the World Trade Center. So basically the old idea of the military base was to have a place that was close to the Middle East, because in Djibouti is in the Gulf of Eden. So we all know the Suez Canal. I mean, Houthi rebels did a whole lot like attacking that place. And the US recently used that place as a staging area to attack the Houthi rebels. So they established the military base because of September 11 to have a camp a base that they could easily launch attacks against terrorists and other state actors. That was in 2002, and the place is called Camp Lemonnier because it was formerly a French base.
Yeah.
And then most recently, in 2017, China established their own military base there. And I think Seton mentioned before we started that about China and the
BRI.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
So they established a port. So later on, they established a military base. So it was first a port, and then in the port, they have a military base in that port. And what are the reasons too? They want to counter terrorism. They want to do to evacuate their citizens in case of issues like we saw in Libya.
Yeah.
Libya is another country we need to talk about when we talk about neocolonialism and how it has affected us. Because I think about most
Well, let's not
expand it.
Yeah, let's not expand that.
Well, I just remembered because like that was one of the reasons that they gave so that they can easily evacuate their citizens because of what they learned during the Libyan crisis. Because a lot of Chinese people were there. Italy too has a base there. France has a base there. So we have 5 different countries in just one country. And you know what that means? They'll be playing some form of games with each other.
Geopolitical.
So meaning that like regular Djiboutians are like just pawns in some people's game.
So let's stay on that now. Although I wanted to get your initial perspective of what you think about neocolonialism as a topic.
Yes.
Right. So maybe you can give that, then we'll continue with the form of neocolonialism in those areas.
All right. So I think I agree with Abiodun to a large extent that we tend to focus on outsiders as being the cause of our problems, especially in this part of the world. We currently have a president, that has resulted in a lot of hardship for the country. And people are still talking about what happened in 1960, 1966. Like, sometimes it gets tiring. Like, what are we doing in 2024? So now, a lot of these countries, you mentioned the World Bank, you mentioned IMF, but I think about why they were established in the first instance. Now, for example, the World Bank and IMF were established to help other countries economically that were struggling.
Yeah.
And it was established after World War II.
Yeah.
Now, Europe was destabilized here. So World Bank was not created in terms of like, which African countries do we need to help? They were created to help
majorly the European countries that were
to get back on their feet here. So that they now expanded it to other countries. Now, you get a good point that like some of the policies they have tend to affect those countries that they help. For example, you saw the structural adjustment program of Babangida and how that really decimated our economy. So yeah, all those things happen. And as I mentioned, in South America, where they were heavily involved in changing government, even in Africa too. We saw the case of Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana. We had, there was this guy in Congo, I can't remember his name now, one of the founding leaders of their own democracy there. So he was killed as well. So definitely they've had certain, like very, would I say, Bush methods of getting their ways. So yeah, they've done that, but more recently, they've not really been that much, directly influencing, changing people's government and all that.
So, but would you say, is it, that's how you perceive neocolonialism basically?
Yes.
Like it's more subtle nowadays.
Now it's more subtle. Before it was much more heavily involved, like they were sending boots on ground.
Yeah,